Hello, guys. I hope everything is fine and you can see me. Please, somebody confirm in the chat that you can see me because it took me a little bit longer to connect and I was like 1 second nervous that everything will go fine. Anyway, I'm really glad to be with you. And at first, I had an idea. Thank you. I see that everything is fine. Thank you. I had an idea to take you out in the street and to show you maybe more, or maybe find a nice cafe and to chat there. But it is so loud on the streets, and I live close to the center. And maybe even from time to time, you will hear some music. That is because our central pedestrian street is now full of various musicians who sing and play and collect money for the Ukrainian armed forces. But to tell you the truth, many of them, I guess, just use this opportunity to perform on public because some of the bands are really good and others are just like using the opportunity that people won't beat them because they are collecting money for the good purpose. Thank you, and my greetings to all the beautiful countries you represent. And I'm really grateful that you have come, and we will be able to communicate. So I'm looking forward to your questions. But maybe before the questions start, and okay, I have a question already. So I have a friend in Kherson and he didn't reply to the message that was sent 5 days ago. The situation in Kherson is really bad. From one point of view, there are no very hot military actions there, but the city and the region is mainly occupied by Russian troops, and they try to make it part of Russia now. And the population of Kherson is totally against it. And today, it seems to me, if I'm not mistaken, they have their Day of Russia. And they tried to celebrate it in Kherson, and people did not show up, even those people who like free music and free food. And that is generally because Kherson has always been a very patriotic city, even with the majority of people speaking Ukrainian. And for me, I'm very much worried for Kherson, and I need back to Ukraine as soon as possible, because I do think that your friend is okay, because from what I know, they have cut down Ukrainian mobile operators, and they make people buy Russian mobile operators. So that may be the main reason why your friend does not respond your messages, and maybe he will change a number and then he will be able to answer you. But at the beginning of this occupation, they also had lists of pro-Ukrainian activists, active citizens, and they were arresting these people or executing these people in Kherson. They also tried to switch the region into rubles and bring more Russian products, new Russian supermarkets, and so on. So they are acting very quickly. And in general, to tell you the truth, I think that this fast occupation of Kherson region and Kherson city was a huge mistake, and not just a mistake, but also a kind of betrayal in Ukrainian special services at the beginning in February, because a certain territory close to Kherson was mined to prevent Russian troops from coming ever. And somewhere in February, as a part of military teachings or something, this territory was demined. And of course, this is an example of betrayal. So, in general, people continue protesting in Kherson. They are very pro-Ukrainian, and I hope that this territory will be back as soon as possible. And of course, yes, they try to incorporate. At first, they had an idea to make Kherson another so-called republic, just as DNR and LNR. But you all know that the idea of this republics failed, and they realized that it is impossible to make these people come for the votes and referendums. And I hope you understand that all these referendums, including the referendum in Crimea, were fake. And so people wanted to come won't come, and that's why they have lost the idea to make Kherson National Republic or whatever, and they decided that they want to swallow Kherson as a part of Russia, and that's why they change for Russian passports, and they bring rubles, and what the currency level is just like 1 to 1, which is totally against the normal logics. And but I know that there are lots of rebellious groups and guerrilla groups in Kherson, in Melitopol, and orcs are afraid to walk alone in the streets of the cities, and typically they go in groups of 5 because many of them were killed by civilians who organized as guerrillas. And also they try to change everything, like bring Russian products to supermarkets. That's something that happened in Crimea too, and from what we read, people are totally dissatisfied with that. Also, I had a question for whether we have a national holiday tomorrow. Well, we don't, but we have this religious holiday, Trinity Sunday, that coincides this year with the Catholic celebration, and somehow in Ukraine it's a big holiday. Typically, when our religious holidays, important religious or national holidays, fall on Sunday, we have the next day free. Just like switch our holiday, but now we don't have additional holidays because like it's war and we work all the time. So even after the day after Easter was not a free day, and that is why. Do you think Ukraine will win the war if Russia moves in current pace? No. Well, like the thing is that Russians, they also try to fix their positions in the east. I think the situation in the east of Ukraine is sad because we want to win quickly and we don't want to lose our people. And hundreds of people, hundreds of soldiers die on both sides every day. And this is totally different from the kind of war we have at the beginning in 2014, for example. But Russians do not manage to do what they want. And from the very beginning, when they did not manage to take the Kiev, and then when they are moving really slowly, and for example, this battle of Severodonetsk, the city is destroyed. The majority of people left it before the start of this military action. But at the same time, from what we see, they try to fix their positions, especially in the south, close to Kherson and elsewhere. What do? I don't know how to explain that well, but they build fortresses, or they build 2 or 3 levels of fortresses made of concrete and other resistant materials, which prove that this is perhaps the line where they plan to stay. The problem is that the weapons that we get are really slow. From one point of view, when you read the news, it's really good. But then there are lots of bureaucracy and there are lots of like additional things. We won't give that or we won't give this. And Russians, they choose this tactic. So first it is aviation, so that bombs and shoots. Then we have heavy artillery, and only then they have tanks, soldiers, and so on. So Ukrainians do not have that much aviation and artillery. And also it is good when we get this long distance rockets and missiles. Why? Because you don't have to come close to them. Russians fight with really old weapons that date back to the 60s or 50s, and it's really like funny, but still these weapons, they work. And I do think that the realistic plan for Russia is to fight for the east of Ukraine. But of course, if we lose the support and attention of the West, and also I'm really worried for the winter that is coming, because it will be both difficult for Ukrainian soldiers, but it will also be difficult for Europe and the world without Russian gas, and with all this with French presidents and German chancellors who want to negotiate with Russia. I do feel sometimes very depressive because you don't negotiate with with Hitler. You don't negotiate with people who kill hundreds of innocent civilians and who come to an independent country just because they want it. And I don't know, like, it's not okay to accept and to think that it will finish in Ukraine. Because if you have like a maniac, he won't be satisfied with just one victim. If he says that he is allowed to do that, and I believe this was a totally wrong tactics with Putin and his regime for a really long period of time, because like at the beginning when he started doing this nasty things with Chechnya, with Georgia, and with Crimea in Ukraine, these were the signs. And that's why I'm not trying to frighten you or to persuade that you have to support Ukraine because if he doesn't stop here. No, that's the logic of such kind of guys. If they are not stopped, they continue doing what they do. So that's why it's extremely important to understand that, of course, it is the greatest problem for Ukraine, but it is also a global problem and the attack on the world order. Okay, let me read some. I don't know how to pronounce well guerrilla. That is like partisan movements. What is the national flower of Ukraine? Maybe these are next to you. Now, these are peonies. This is my personal flower, one of the flowers that I love a lot. But perhaps now the majority of you associate Ukraine with the sunflower. We have lots of them, sunflowers, especially in the east and south of Ukraine. And we produce oil. And by the way, Ukrainians eat seeds. You can just like roast them a little bit. You can eat them with salt. You can add them to bread, but I personally hate people who eat them because this is a very bad habit, but it's kind of popular when watching football or spending your time. And another thing that I've learned from our soldiers, that they also used to eat lots of them because like they prevent you from falling asleep. Ukrainian drivers also often eat sunflower seeds, but it does not look very cute when you eat this seeds. Well, Mr. Putin comparing himself for Peter the Great. Yeah, when people discuss the illnesses of Putin and the prospects of his future death and all of that, I think that we don't pay much attention to his main disease, to his psychological, psychiatric state, because it goes without saying that there is something totally wrong with him, because even it is not a bad character, it is not a number of complexes that I'm sure he has, but it is also a kind of paranoia and a disease that influences him. And of course, slowly, step by step, he has decided that he is a mixture of Stalin, of Peter the Great, and the continuation of all these great Russian tsars. And all, by the way, if you look attentively at the prominent Russian political figures, these are always despots and dictators. These are never Democrats, kind people, and so on. They always glorify people who kill even their own citizens and millions. What always surprised me is that many dictators, they attack other states and they destroy other nations, which is also bad. But Russians manage both. They destroy and kill other nations, but they also ruin their own intelligent, clever people, those who have for freedom and so on. So they are also, for example, that Stalin, gulags were created for Soviets, for Russians. The majority of people were Russians, Ukrainians, who were treated as the citizens of the best country in the world. So this is something totally wrong. And of course, Peter the Great was also the author of one of the great tragedies in the history of Ukraine. That is a Baturin tragedy. I had a separate vlog on that. Baturin is a very beautiful city, one of the capitals of Ukrainian Cossack hetmans. My great grandparents and my grandma comes from that land, Chernihiv region, and I'm very proud of that. And sometimes I like to joke that maybe I have hetman's blood in me. And Baturin was destroyed in 1709, it seems to me, because our hetman Mazepa wanted independence and decided to support Sweden in the war with Russia. And Tsar Pyotr always treated Ukraine as a part of Russia, and he decided to destroy Baturin, and he killed thousands of civilians, women, children, and there is a museum, and there are lots of recordings, and even European newspapers wrote about the tragedy and that the waters of the river Seine there were colored in red with Ukrainian blood. So the greatest mistake of Ukrainians is that from century to century, they believed it is possible to negotiate with Russians. It is possible to forgive them something. No, it is impossible because they always break their rules, and Ukraine is a litmus test or something for them, always. And even when you speak with many pro-European democratic Russians and you ask them about Ukrainians, you will see that they feel very chauvinistic and they still see us as the richest, the cleverest, the most beautiful province of Russia, which is not that way because we are both older, totally different in everything, starting from language and finishing with the attitude to human's life, to your responsibilities in your society, family life, and all the other things that I typically spoke about. Okay, thank you. Partisan is easier for me because we have the very same words in Ukrainian language. How would I kill Putin? Well, I can speak about a number of things, and to tell you the truth, I would. I wouldn't have doubts, and I wouldn't like it to be like lots of blood and intestines around me because I'm an aesthete, you know. But I don't think the problem is, I realize that the death of Putin is not the end of this bloody regime. And of course, I want him to die because this will give us some time. They will start quarreling, choosing new Tsar. Maybe for 20 or 30 years, they will have normal life. They will try to build democracy. And then 20 years later, or 30 years, or 50 years later, they will nurture another dictator. I think when people, psychologists, world worked really hard with Nazi regime and people who were poisoned by Nazi regime, they were poisoned like for a couple of decades. And Russians are poisoned by this totalitarianism, by this ugly attitude to human life, including to Russian human life for centuries. So I don't know what kind of psychologists, military people must work with them. For me, honestly, the best solution is the fall of Russia and new independent states on the territory of Russia. Well, like this, Russia can stay, but as a smaller part of the country, you know, like Smolensk, Moscow, maybe. Even St. Petersburg very often says we are different, we're a separate state. And Siberia, I have mentioned that to you, Tatarstan, Chechnya, which is now a part of Russia, you know, it never wanted to be. And there are other, Yakutia, I don't know what's the English for that, but it's the Far East, where Chukchi people live, and they're close to Alaska to some extent. And in 1991, Yakutia actually declared independence. They wanted to be an independent state, but very quickly, they denounced their independence and returned back to Russia. That is a very rich region. It's very cold region, and it's depressive because it's in Russia, but it is very rich in diamonds, natural resources, and so on, and very independent because it's like really far away from Moscow, maybe like 6-8 hours. You know, Russia is the largest country in the world. There is a question: why do you need new territories if your territories are so bad? You don't have normal toilets, normal roads, everything looks depressive. Nobody wants to move to Russia. Like, well, maybe some exotic people, but it's not a trend like to move to the United States or to move to, I don't know, Italy or France. It's not a trend to move to Russia. Why? Not because of the weather. And so I think that this fall and liberation and independence of new countries and a smaller Russia could lead to a normal thing. You know, I have read a quote about, it seems to me it was a quote by Hedroitz, and he was speaking about Poland, but it is very true about Russia and other empires who dream to stay empires, that when these countries lose their ambition to be empires, this is the moment when they can become successful, when they can become rich, because you don't live in the modern world with empires. And this pains, I don't know how you call that, like when you don't have your arm, but you still have this pains. These are like hallucinations. They have these hallucinations that empires can exist, but they cannot. With modern technologies, with Ukrainians not wanting to be a part of Russia, you cannot make us. The problem is that they continue killing us, but they cannot make us. And the more they kill, the less it is likely that we will be ready to speak about Russia or to understand something. And that's why it is just unnecessary victims, because people believe that we have to save Putin's face and the regime. No, we have to kill Putin, as you advise. We have to liberate Russians. Then, if you tell me that all Russians are good, that I don't have to judge them, this is just their president. So let's liberate them from this president, make them free and happy, and finally smiling. Um, Greed and thirst for power. Is there anything else driving the tiny minority of Ukrainians who choose to collaborate with the occupant? Um, well, I don't think like these people feel themselves as Ukrainians. I do think that they were infected by Ruski Mir idea, and they believe that they are, they have this word Maloros, which is like a small Rus, small Russian or something. And I believe that they treat Ukraine as a province of the Russian Empire. And you know that in every empire, when it Roman Empire, it had its vassals. So they feel like they are vassals, they are a part of the Ruski Mir culture. And also they use it as a political opportunity. Typically, the people who support them are really like ugly, funny. When you look at them, they don't look like normal deputies or normal mayors. These are typical losers. But these losers somehow got into this political pool of a village or of a city. They live there, work there, and finally, voila, they are the only ones who are ready to cooperate, to collaborate. And look at this, like, I don't read and watch the resources of LNR, DNR, and so on, but sometimes I come across their TV shows, or I look at their leaders who speak. And when you look at them, okay, I don't judge people by their appearance, but I do judge people by the way they use their body language. Um, well, there is a bit of femininity. There is a joke like that. A woman, if a woman after 30, it seems to me, Chanel said that if the woman after 30 is not nice, then perhaps this is not a smart woman, because you learn about yourself, how to act, how to dress up, what to say. And this is the same about men. And I'm not speaking just about appearance, but the kind of people. What are these people? How they build the sentences? What proverbs they use? What jokes they tell? They show that they are very low in the social class, and these are the leaders of this DNR LNR. So I think that people who collaborate with occupants are those who believe they are a part of Russian Empire, those who are Russians or various people who were put into Ukrainian life, because Russia prepared these operations for decades. It is just naive Ukrainians and naive Europeans lived and believed that the world is normal. No, it is not. And also people who are like losers, and this gives them an opportunity to become someone in the Ruski Mir. Thank you, Croatia. I know that Croatia supports Ukraine. I'm very grateful. Do you think Macron, Scholz, and Draghi are coming to Kyiv to show their support, or to pressure Ukrainian government to get back to the negotiation? Definitely to push Ukrainian government back to negotiations. I don't know. Like, I have to tell you that I do separate, and Ukrainians do separate people from the presidents or counselors who do not support us enough or demonstrate this like fear and respect to Russia. I know that Germany, for example, does really much for Ukrainian refugees, and they know many people, especially those who were living separated by the Berlin Wall. They know all the good that Russians can bring to their world, and Ukrainians also separate that. But in my head and everywhere, we cannot understand. Okay, I do realize that Germany and France and many other countries, including my country, Ukraine, are very dependent on the Russian resources. First, that was our mistake, Ukrainian, French, German, that we became that much dependent on one country. But second, these resources will stay in Russia after Putin is dead and his regime falls. So I do understand that your plants, factories, and flats need that gas. But let's kill Putin faster then, or change the regime, or make a super special operation with all the best services and so on. Put a normal president or help Russians elect a normal president, which is not likely, and then negotiate your prices, buy gas, and work with Russia. Return back all your enterprises back to Russia. Why do they believe that no, you cannot change anything, Putin must be there forever? No, he is a war criminal. He is an old dying dictator. He's a president for the 22 years. Come on, guys, you would never allow something like that in your countries. Why do you still treat him as a political figure? So we can negotiate with Russia, but after Putin, Shoigu, and all the war criminals leave. And I don't understand why people who were educated, people who lived and worked in normal countries like Macron, still believe we have to save the face. Why? Putin is not eternal. Putin is not even a pope. So perhaps we should help even Russians to start anew. And then Russia will become a new normal country again. It won't need to be isolated. It's simple as that. So I'm very much afraid that they will start pushing, and the colder, the more cold it will become. Like I see that we get weapons from the West. We are grateful for that, but this is really slow, and there are lots of various items that they don't write in newspapers, and it takes really long. And Russians are fighting with their old things, but they still shoot. And then it will get colder, and people will like start pushing Ukraine, and that's a problem. Because if we don't finish this war with our victory, and we will have a frozen war conflict, for example, they will come back. And they will continue. And they can continue with other countries because, you know, they threaten Poland and other countries with a nuclear bomb. And I know it all sounds totally silly, but this war sounded totally silly for me in the beginning of February. Okay, it's not that you're late, that you're here. Oh my God. So I'm sorry, I'm reading the questions and I'm not like good at quick reading because like, okay. Thank you guys from the US. Thank you from, should be clean to the toilets. Putin, I think he should be in the toilet, you know. I recently read the news. I did not believe that. Do you know, actually, it was in Ukrainian news and it's normal news that Putin has a special guy who carries his, how do you call it? Well, like when he goes into toilet, he leaves something in that toilet. So that guys take that out of toilet and carries it away because you can use his biological elements and analyze, for example, what medication he takes and so on. So can you imagine what kind of job a guy has? Do Ukrainians eat roasted and salted pumpkin seeds? Yes, and a lot. And I actually like pumpkin seeds more than sunflower seeds because sunflower seeds are very, very oily. And when you can eat them a lot because it's very contagious, like you continue eating them, but then you feel bad. And pumpkin seeds, as far as I know, they are useful. We also add them to various kind of bakings. So yeah, and pumpkins are very popular here. We make pumpkin porridge with rice and milk, and it's actually very tasty. You can add raisins. This is a very typical autumn dish. Also, we bake them and eat them with sugar, or just like with meat, depending what you prefer. From what you have saying, most Ukrainian people are well educated and hardworking. So how did some not see that Russia would come and much more of country's budget spent on military? I don't know, because we have one great Ukrainian writer and a philosopher who was the mother of our great Ukrainian, another even greater Ukrainian poetess, Lesia Ukrainka. So her mother, Lena Pchilka, she had one really nice quote. She said that all the problems of Ukrainians are because of their tolerance. We are like really kind. And typically, even in relationships, you always think that people will act the way you do. And we did realize that we are not doing anything evil. And it was difficult to imagine that the full scale war is possible. Even our military experts, they believe they can try and take over the East. But I think Russians were also deceived by their FSB, and that's why lots of people are fired there now, because they were trying to create the image that the majority of Ukrainians are pro-Russian. That Kyiv is pro-Russian, other cities, Kharkiv, but it turned out not to be so. And I think they were also deceived to some extent. Maybe if they knew the real situation, maybe if they were not lying to that dictator that much, he wouldn't start this full-scale war. Also, I think he thought we will be very quick afraid, and we will give up. But no. And I can, of course, we're foolish to do that. I'm not saying we were smart, because like our president, whom I love now, but he was building roads, and now we have this harsh joke in Ukraine that like he built the roads for Russian tanks to drive better roads, because much money was spent on that. But I think that is because like all of you living in your normal countries, you cannot imagine your other country. You can even like I think that even now, when you see this war in Ukraine, you cannot imagine Russia attacking your country. It can, but when you are like normal sitting drinking coffee, you won't believe that. You will say it's not very likely, so something typical happened here, but that was our huge mistake, because this is a totally insane behavior of Putin. But if you have a neighbor like that, and our 300 years of history must have persuaded us. What I'm afraid of is like that in 30 or 50 years, Ukrainians once again will forgive Russians, and for us it's bad. We cannot do that, because this is a totally insane neighbor that we have. But I can also ask a counter question, uh, why, seeing that we are so different? Because Putin observed us attentively for a really long period of time. And it is not America who organized our revolutions. It is not, it has always been like that. It has always been, Ukraine has always been different. Before NATO, before you, we had so many partisan movements during Soviet Union. So he must have realized that, okay, with Belarus, it works, but with Ukraine, it will not. I don't know why, knowing so much, I don't think that this full-scale war is also good for Russian regime. They believed it will be different. Why didn't they also realize that they are doing something wrong and Ukraine won't surrender? That is also a question to, the special services that did not work out really well. Is Denis the Widow a credible Ukrainian source? Well, when I say that I'm not a professional vlogger, many of the names I learned from you. Operator Starsky, for example, I have learned about him long ago, but once again, from your comments, I don't follow Ukrainian vloggers that much, but I have looked this Denis the Widow, and it seems to me he's a normal guy who had his channel before the war. I had my channel to watch other channels. I was not active, like I didn't plan to do the YouTube, and my only reason was just like I wanted to speak out. And many people do that more professionally or choose the topics. I do have this internal fight, always, because you can make a catchy headline. And to make a catchy headline, you always have to say Russian in it. And I don't always want to say it. Also, some of you advise me to subscribe to Russian bloggers. I will never do it. I understand that it helps with the algorithms, but no. So I cannot tell you whether he's a credible source. I did not follow him attentively. I just I love reading your comments, and I spend much time doing that and answering. And I don't have like if I'm doing anything else on YouTube, this is something about like cooking because I have also some other things to do. And but is Belarus is even worse than Russia? Why do you think Belarusians don't speak their language? Belarus is not worse than Russia for me and for the majority of Ukrainians. And if you ask me, I do feel closer to Belarus people than to Russians. And Belarus is very much under influence of Russia, and I think it is now a province of Russia, a union state. And Lukashenko is not strong enough, and he needs Russian support. And I was very sorry when their revolution did not work out. It seems to be in 2020, but at least they are trying to do something. And they don't speak their language because of decades of Russification. In Ukraine, we had decades of Russification, but we had more writers, poets, dissidents, people who were fighting against Russia, various partisan movements, and so on. Belarus is smaller. It was more dependent. They don't have sea. They are more dependent on Russian economy. And that's why slowly they occupied Belarus. And I think that with our president Yanukovych, they had a similar plan. They wanted the silent occupation of Ukraine, something they did to Belarus. And they are very bad in Belarus because they laugh at Belarus language when they hear it. They are very chauvinistic. And I feel really sorry for Belarus, but I do believe if we manage to win this war, the changes are awaiting Belarus. And from what I know, there people are more in support of Ukrainians. Yeah. Mm. Yeah, we cannot negotiate with terrorists, and I agree that. Yes, millions of Christians, millions of people were killed, and Soviet regime. Once again, I do know that Soviet supporters and lots of good Russians they burn when they read uh, and they watch the videos. When I say that Soviet regime actually killed more people than Nazi regime, but this is true because Nazi regime like finished in 1945 and Soviet regime continued. And many famous Ukrainian writers, for example, one of our famous Ukrainian writers died in a Soviet camp in 1986. 86, that is not so far away, in time. So totalitarian Soviet regime existed longer. And that's why the number of victims is greater. No, there are no, we have like um, this mentality thing. I don't know about one proverb, like in Russia, and in Ukraine, you say that between two evils, you have to pick a smaller one. And I know that it seems to be in the English language, you have like, you don't have to pick among the evils. So you don't have to pick among totally all of them are bad. And I do think that after the Second World War, it was extremely important to turn back the troops and to liberate Poland, Ukraine, Lithuania, and that would have saved millions of killed by Soviet people. Thank you. How is Bohdan Khmelnytsky regarded and remembered in Ukraine? There is monument in Kiev and city named after him, but Shevchenko, yeah. We have like very complicated history, and those of you who read Ukrainian history books do say me that you have a complicated history. I don't like this thing. I don't like this comparison, but many people do say that Ukraine is situated on the crossroads of Europe. And to some extent, this is true. We are close to this post-Mongolian Russia and Europe. And that's why for when we lost our strengths at a certain period, we were torn between empires. And that's why Bohdan Khmelnytsky, who was fighting with Poland, decided that he needs an ally and chose Russia. And then, from what we know and from what modern Ukrainian historians claim, he planned that this alliance won't be forever. And he also wanted to launch something like a monarchy in Ukraine. And he had a very good son. a clever one, that he planned he will pass his rule to him. But that son was killed somewhere close to Moldova or in Moldova in one of the battles. And his second son was kind of less successful and less clever. And when he died, Bogdan Khmelnytsky, it happened earlier than he expected. And Ukraine was kind of, part of Ukraine was kind of given to Russia. And that's why Shevchenko, who did not enjoy living with Russian Empire, said that. So, from one point of view, he was a man fighting for Ukrainian independence, but the problem is that many Ukrainian hetmans did that mistake. When fighting for Ukrainian independence, they were looking for allies. Turks, Russians, Swedes, Poles, and you know that in geopolitics, and we understand that even now, they are your allies, but to a certain extent, and it all happened that way. Kiev Warsaw is the most scary to Russian elites as it revives old imperium, which historically always kept Russia at bay. What are your thoughts? Well, like maybe I did not clearly understand the question, but I do think that Russia understands how far away they are from the civilized world. And look at all of their children of their politicians, including Putin's daughters. They all live in Europe or in the US. They are sometimes citizens of these countries. To tell you the truth, I cannot understand how Russians can tolerate that. For me, that would be very uncomfortable. I understand that, like, children or wife of my president can have houses somewhere abroad. That's okay. I would like to have a house abroad and stay living in Ukraine. I think maybe one day when I become a writer, I will earn a lot of money and I will buy myself a villa in Tatry or elsewhere. But when you are a citizen, when you are a president and your children are citizens of this rotten West, this proves that Russia is a failed state. And all of this oligarch politicians, they use it to drink resources and money from it, but then to live in Europe. And some Ukrainian oligarchs, because we have inherited some oligarchs inspired by Russia, they also always live in Europe. They only come for elections or for collecting money, and then they escape. And in Europe, there are problems, but they are not that great. And I do believe they clearly see that the world lives better than Russia. And I don't think they plan to make Russia live better, because poor, uneducated, hungry people are easy to control and to rule. And that's why, of course, but you know, this Russian propaganda, they try to persuade us that Poland wants to take the western part of Ukraine. I do understand it's not that way. I'm not that confident about Hungary, you know, but about Poland, I'm confident that they don't plan to occupy my city, for example. And I do believe this. We have in Ukraine this Baltic, Black Sea, Baltic vertical axis, something. So I do believe that Poland, Ukraine, Lithuania, Estonia, Latvia, other countries that can strengthen each other. We understand we have similar traumas from Russia, and we realize that we don't need to save Russia's face. And I think, and Finland and Sweden can also go here. And I think we realize, these countries, we realize we have to fight and we can strengthen each other. And actually, that's what we do right now. Yeah, Russian fall is the only. Yeah, I agree with you. Russians made no democratic choices for the last 140 years. Yeah, I don't know, like, yeah, this logics that we can reach Russia. Come on, if you send us these weapons and we would be the first to reach Russia, that would be a problem. But now when they kill us and they bomb us, isn't that okay to reach them and to make Russians feel, maybe if their people at least feel what we feel, at least 1% of what we feel with this air raids and so on, maybe their people will react somehow. So I do think it's wrong, like, not to be afraid, and just like we are not going to do that. But maybe one day I will record separate vlog about Russian literature and Russian culture, because we were made to read that at school. To tell you the truth, in my like foreign literature classes, I would have like 40% of literature that would be Russian, and we would be explained that Russian is the great literature, but British is also the great literature, and French is the great literature, and American is so great, and but when you read it, and I'm not like definitely I don't like Russian culture, especially now. And But there is another thing that people, when even those people who are against cancellation, belays, composers. I'm not going to speak about that. Uh, I'm going to attract your attention to one fact that in modern Russian culture, you don't see that many stars, you don't see that many new writers, that many new composers, and even many new ballerinas. What they use is their resources from the past centuries. But give me like 100 great names from a 140 million people country. You won't. If you look at their singers, that is an epic fail. Like, whoa. And that is why, for a long period of time, I could not read like Russian newspapers, watch Russian TV or websites, because they are too primitive and they are outdated for me. When I look at them, I think of Ukraine in the 90s, for example. And there is something psychological around when you dip into the literature, for example, you see all the sufferings, dark souls, killings. It's very difficult to find a happy writer, for example. I know like Edgar Poe exists, but um, in general, the way they depict their world is always like anti-utopian, is always negative, is always depressive, is always dark, and this also says something about the culture. And yeah, phantom pain, thank you, that is the word I was looking to. How do you see the fall of the Russian Federation happen? I think that if we had more money, and the world has more money, we could invest this money in various national movements, not Nazi, not nationalistic, but independence movements in this parts of Russia that want to be independent, because people are suppressed, people are prosecuted, they don't know how to do that. And just as with Soviet Union, when Russia is poor economically and Putin's regime is, people are dissatisfied, that is the reason for them to separate. It seems to me that some of the letters that put sanctions on Russia actually states that these sanctions will disappear if a particular part of Russia announces independence. So, for example, if it is very difficult for you to live under and work under sanctions in Siberia, and then you say that Siberia is independent from Russia, you lose all the sanctions. Voila. So we have to push that process too, because Russians are very suppressed. They are traumatized. If you say me that not all Russians are for war in Ukraine, so that then let's think about them as of victims of family violence, And very often, victims of family violence, be it a woman or Johnny Depp, they are suppressed and they don't speak about their problems. Why? Because they are in a very bad psychological state. So Russians are in a very bad psychological state and they cannot separate, liberate, and we gotta help them. Of course, the east of Ukraine, it was not a referendum, it was not a vote, it was just like people with the guns giving you one bulletin with one question. You can never vote with just one question. At least there should be I support or I don't support. It is never just one question. Um, I don't like, I would like to see Putin before an international tribunal, but I so much doubt it is possible. Uh, and like, I don't know, he's hiding somewhere in his bunker, and so many people want to save his face. Uh, More likely situation for me, if it gets worse for Russia, he will die or he will be killed by his friends, and they will say he had a heart attack or something, and they will have this coup in Kremlin or something. That is more likely for me. Anyone in the Rada is not proud of being Ukrainian? Uh, no, like many people in Verkhovna Rada, if you think about that. How do Ukrainians want to see that outcome for Russia? The fall of Russia. Separate independent state. That would be the best. That would be the best for me because, like, they are ill. They imagine themselves as an empire and then want to continue swallowing their territories that around that were once Russia. They still believe once Russia, forever Russia, and it's not always like that. And countries that were occupied by Russia know what I'm talking about. And how does Ukraine fight against Russian disinformation? Well, like there are different programs that teach Ukrainians media literacy in general. There is a separate I don't know how do they call it, like internet battalion or something, where people try to destroy various fakes, like to erase them from publics, from news or elsewhere. Also, we are often warned by our official sources, like the Office of the President and other, about typical disinformation campaigns that can be held. And in general, of course, if we know that this is a Russian source, we will never trust a Russian. But of course, they try to bring some narratives into Ukrainian society, not showing they are Russian, but typically we hear on the press conferences of the presidents, military men that don't listen. This is another popular Russian message, like, for example, um, give up the east of Ukraine and you will be free or something. So we do understand it's not the normal word. But of course, there are some people who believe, there are some people who like watch videos and they are afraid that something will be bad, but you can never like. But I think that the level of media literacy has grown tremendously in Ukraine because of this heavy trainings that we receive each month. Uh, to individual Ukraine families, I think it's difficult to sponsor individual Ukraine families, but there are organizations that help and work. And maybe I will try to record a video about volunteering because, you know, there are different people. There are people who want to invest money into military things like buying weapons, and there are people who are against weapons and want to invest in healthcare or anything else. I do know some local organizations that work in my region, but they are small NGOs and funds. But you can easily find some general Ukrainian that have pages in English, and even by the design of their page, you can see they are trustworthy, starting from the National Bank or Povernish Живим. I will try to record the video. It won't be a very interesting video, but I will try to record the video and leave some links to different kinds of support that is possible. Yeah, thank you, Norway, and Ukrainians like Norway and all that connections with the Nordic countries. We feel closer to you than like to the rest. Yeah, I think that Vladimir Putin killed more people than Saddam Hussein, and that would definitely be like, I know he was very much terrified with the death of Gaddafi, and that is the moment that something, that what news say, maybe it's not true, but was the moment when something clicked in his head, and he was like very much afraid for his life. Yeah, I've heard about international and Ukrainian soldiers that were sentenced to death in DNR. And DNR, you know, this is like they don't have a nice word for that. This is like a hole in everything. It's totally destroyed. One of the reasons why so many Ukrainians, even those that were more pro-Russian, are against Russia right now, because they saw life in DNR, in the LNR, and they realized this is not the kind of life they want, you know. And they don't have normal legislation there. They don't have normal medicine there. They don't have anything normal there, even normal cafes. And some crimes are permitted there. And capital punishment is not possible in Russia, as far as I know, but it is possible in Donetsk Republic and of so-called Donetsk Republic. And of course, there's a Russian operation to send. And I think I am not. I hope they won't execute these people, but that is the way to frighten and to make less foreign people, foreign soldiers, come to Ukraine too. Uh, no, it's not about America. It's not about like Russia has been our enemy for 300 years, long before NATO existed, long before we were of interest into the United States. Um, Come on, I like United States are our ally, and they are very far away to change something tremendously in Ukraine. Um, we are very different in the language, in the food, in anything, but we are close in the values that we share, in some kind of respect. And once again, if you say it's both Russia and USA fighting in Ukraine, once again, think how many people want to come and live in Russia, live a Russian dream, or something. And think about the United States. How many people want to come and live in the United States? That is an answer. Russia is an ugly, dying monster empire that wanted to rebuild Soviet Union, failed in that, and is dying. But when this dying monster falls, it can kill many who were standing next to it. And Ukraine is actually suffering of that. Uh, Macron wants to negotiate because he most likely fears the instant collapse of the Ukrainian. We did not have that large Ukrainian industry that is destroyed. I see finally some pro-Russian people coming. No, personally, I think that Putin has some information on Macron or something, and Macron has to do that with him somehow, or Russian money in France. There are lots of. I have been to Nice, a very beautiful city, and um, I liked it a lot. But so much Russian language on the street, so much Russian churches. I had a different vision of Nice when I watched films. The Russian language in Ukraine, I think the Russian language in Ukraine will stay. It will not be the state language, as it is not the state language, but there are lots of Russian speaking people who fight for Ukraine right now. And I think there is a very nice saying that I have heard from the Russian speaking person. So we don't have to judge people who speak Russian now, and we don't have to change the people who speak Russian now, but it's important that their children speak Ukrainian. And from what I see, lots and lots of people now who were bilingual and so on, they switched to Ukrainian as their main language now because like they don't want to speak Russian. But no one is prosecuted for speaking Russian, especially those of you who visited Kyiv, Kharkiv, Odessa, you know that really well. Uh, what are relationships between uh, Russians and Ukrainians who live in Ukraine? I don't recognize them well in Poland. Uh, like there are not that many, Russians living in Ukraine, and mm, it all depends on their attitude. If they are Russians who understand that Putin is doing wrong and that Ukraine is a free and independent country, that everything will be okay with that Russian. But if it's a bad Russian, then he will have problems, perhaps. But in general, like those who did not flee Ukraine, there are Russians who support. We have many people who are, I don't know, like by origin are Russians, but they have chosen to be Ukrainians politically. And I do believe that your nationality is not like 100% that decides what you are. You can make your decision that, well, I don't know, Jewish, but I want to be Ukrainian, or I'm French, but I feel like Italian. And when you live in this country for years and you follow the rules and you love the culture, you respect the people, then finally you may become a part of that. Um mhm. Okay. Okay. Ukraine, what Ukraine did Donbass people? Well, uh, Donbass is a part of Ukraine that was always like that back in Cossack time. Donbass and Kharkiv regions suffered very much during Soviet times because they made Holodomor on these territories and killed millions with famine. Then they brought lots of people from the depths of Russia to Donbass to crucify the region. That's why many of these people started speaking Russian, but they still wanted to be a part of Ukraine. And then, after the revolution of 2014, Russians annexed Crimea and decided they will manage to annex Donbass, which is rich in industrial plants, minerals, gas, or whatever. But they failed to annex it because Ukrainians of Donbass opposed. And Russian soldiers dressed up like, partisans or something, but all knew these were Russian people. And now they even speak about this special operation, came to fight for Donbass and started to create fake Donbass republics. People fled these territories, and Ukraine did not bomb people of Donbass because you will not find this kind of information anywhere apart from pro Russian media. Um, okay, maybe just like one or two questions more, and I will have. Okay, nice question. Let it be. What herbs and spices are characteristic of Ukrainian cuisine? We eat, I have told you that Ukrainians do eat a lot of onion and garlic, which is not very sweet, perhaps, not very, like, I don't know, cute, but that's the truth. Also, we like dill. Also, we like parsley and petersil and peppers of different kinds. And these are just like basic. But now also basilicum, rosemary, and other stuff. But if you think about traditional things, there are a couple of other things. I don't know their English, you know. Uh, and Yeah, a weird question about only salted salmon. No, we have different kinds of salmon. You can buy fresh salmon and roast fresh salmon or I'm sorry, grill fresh salmon. And so-called hunger war. Perhaps this will be the last question that I will manage to answer today. And well, I think this is a very ugly thing. And I think that Russia definitely manipulates uh, global opinion right now because it tries to terrify. They always use it. They terrify us with the lack of resources for winter. They terrify with the lack of food, and somehow they believe that like this totally terrorist approach and totally um, total fear will lead to like you have to accept Russia because if you don't accept it, you will be hungry. If you don't accept it, you will feel cold. And I don't think that's like there are lots of us in this world, normal people in different countries of the world. And we cannot continue living in this fear that Russia will stop letting us, Ukrainians, provide food, or Russia will freeze everyone to death just because they occupied a territory where they have gas. This kind of someone commented of you dig and sell economy. You don't have to be smart to use your natural resources. It is not your gift. You just like occupied your territory, and I think it's really bad that they manipulate this. They manipulate the countries of Africa, the countries of Asia that can suffer from this hunger. So please do not invade Ukraine. Do not block, do not mine our ports. and everything will work perfectly. It is not about because of the sanctions that the world will be hungry. It is because of Russian soldiers blocking Ukrainian ports, stealing Ukrainian grains, shooting Ukrainian farmers. And if we accept that, they will continue. It is just like with the terrorists. You never give them what they want because they will want more. And I am really grateful that all of you understand that and speak about that in your countries. And like, sometimes when you start to vlog, you do have doubts. I don't always have like 100% ideas that I want to speak. But when I read oh my God, my favorite word, comments that you leave, I feel that it is important to continue this conversation. And I'm really grateful for the advice that you provide. And I'm extra grateful for the conversations that you have back in your countries when you support Ukraine, when you remind about Ukraine, when you say it's not okay, when you destroy the. When you destroy the myths that Russia tries to spread all over the world. And a question I will answer: is it possible to travel to Ukraine? I don't know. Like, we are not 100% open, and of course, we don't have tourists. But I do know that some volunteer missions, some other things, they are present. But in most cases, you will be allowed to travel to safer, semi-safer zones of Ukraine, like mine, or like Lviv, or so on. Anyway, thank you very much for our conversation. Thank you for watching. Thank you for protecting my country in front of those who doubt that it is important. Thank you for becoming my patrons and buying me coffee. That makes me also kind of very surprised and grateful at the same time. Please provide me with the ideas that you would like to hear in my future vlogs. And Slava Ukraini!